Welcome to the Podkey Summary of Keynote from WWDC 2026. Apple's latest update is doing two big things at once. It's making everyday stuff feel quicker and more customizable, and it's pushing a lot harder into AI, with the usual Apple twist of saying privacy has to stay at the center. There's also a meaningful batch of family features here, especially for child accounts and web permissions, which feels less flashy than AI demos, but probably matters more in a lot of homes. One of the smaller changes, but honestly one people will notice right away, is liquid glass customization. Apple added a slider that lets you tune the transparency from super clear to fully tinted, so the interface can look more airy or more solid depending on your taste. And the nice part is, it applies instantly across third-party apps that already use liquid glass. So you don't get that weird mix of one app following the new look and another pretending it's still last year. There's also a real performance push here, especially on iPhone and iPad. App launch times are up to 30% faster because the system preloads key data, and new photos can show up in your library up to 70% faster. AirDrop is now 80% quicker. Moving files from an iPad to an external drive is 5 times faster. And Apple says it also optimized the CPU scheduler for older devices going back to the iPhone 11. That last part matters, because software updates always sound great on stage. But a lot of people just want to know whether their not brand new phone is going to feel snappier on a random Tuesday. On the family side, Apple is introducing a dedicated child account setup, and it comes with age-appropriate content filters, website blocks, and App Store restrictions turned on automatically. That removes a lot of the guesswork for parents who don't want to spend an hour hunting through menus trying to build the right safety setup from scratch. Once that account is in place, parents also get the broader control set, including Ask to Buy, Ask to Browse, and more detailed time allowances that can be tuned by age group. Ask to Browse is basically Apple taking the Ask to Buy idea and applying it to the web. If a child wants to open a new website, they can be prompted to request permission first, and the approval shows up across iPhone, iPad, and Mac. It's on by default for kids under 13, and parents can turn it on for teens too, which gives families a checkpoint without trying to manually pre-block the entire internet, which would be a full-time job. Screen time is also getting recommended daily allowances for entertainment, games, and social media, based on clinical research and guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Parents can adjust the limits, set different rules for school days and weekends, and override them with one tap when real life happens and the schedule goes sideways. The biggest strategic piece is Apple Intelligence, which Apple says is built on a hybrid architecture. Some of the foundation models run on-device, and some run on Apple's private cloud servers with support for text, image, and speech understanding across the system. Apple is also integrating Google's Gemini technology in this setup, while saying user data stays private and isn't exposed in the process. That architecture is what powers the broader system features, including smarter search, visual intelligence, and awareness of what's happening on screen. Siri is getting a much bigger overhaul than a simple tune-up. Apple says it's a completely rebuilt assistant using Apple Intelligence for more natural multi-turn conversations, contextual follow-ups, and visual responses. So instead of treating every request like it appeared out of thin air, Siri is supposed to keep track of the conversation and respond more like an actual assistant. There are also new voice options for pace and emotion, and a dedicated Siri app that syncs conversation history across devices using encrypted iCloud. That's one of those changes that could either become part of your routine fast or sit ignored for months. But at least the ambition here is pretty clear. One of the more concrete AI demos is inside the camera app. There's a Siri mode where you can tap the shutter button and ask what the camera is looking at, and it can respond with real-time answers, nutritional information, or even actions like helping split a bill. Apple says the same visual model is doing image understanding on-device and can use private cloud compute when needed, with the promise that the analysis never leaves the device. A couple of the more practical AI features are landing in Safari and Shortcuts. Safari can now group open tabs into AI-generated topics, pull related pages into those groups and let you close or save a whole topic in one go, which might be the first step towards saving people from their own tab habits. There's also Notify Me, where you describe a change you care about in plain language, and Safari watches the page for it, then sends a notification when that condition is met. In Shortcuts, you can describe an automation in everyday language, like telling it to message someone when you leave work, and it builds the shortcut for you automatically. Then you can refine it by just describing changes, which makes complex multi-app automations much more approachable for people who were never going to hand script them. Apple is also expanding the creative side of its AI tools. Image Playground has been rebuilt with a private cloud generative model, so you can create photorealistic images in whatever style you describe, then export them as wallpapers, contact posters, or marketing graphics. Apple is very explicit that photos aren't sent off the device or stored on Apple servers, which is clearly part of the pitch here, especially as people get more cautious about generative tools. In Photos, there's a feature called spatial reframing that lets you change the apparent camera angle of a photo after the fact. It uses on-device spatial models to preview the shift, then cloud-based generative fill to fill only the newly exposed gaps, while keeping the original lighting and scene consistency intact. All of this comes with Apple repeating its privacy-first position over and over, and in this case, it's central to the whole product story. Apple says Apple Intelligence processing happens either on-device or through private cloud compute, with no personal data stored or accessible to Apple, and outside auditors can verify those guarantees. That's also part of how Apple is trying to distinguish itself from competitors that keep interaction logs for training. The catch is availability. Siri AI won't be available at first in the EU on iPhone and iPad or in China, while Apple works through regulatory compliance. So, the rollout is ambitious, but also cautious, and very Apple in the sense that the company would clearly rather delay features than loosen its privacy and security framing. So that's the shape of this update. Faster devices, more customizable design, stronger family controls, and a much more serious AI push wrapped in a privacy argument Apple wants to own. Some of these changes are headline material. Some are the kind you only notice after a week, but together they make the whole platform feel a lot more modern and a little more thoughtful. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.